right, everybody, hello there. This is my first AMA. Never done this before, so we're going to see how this goes. Hopefully you guys will find some value out of this, and if it goes well, I can do more of these. So yes, I'm going to have my trusty Guinness mug full of matcha green tea to help me get through the series here of questions. So, first and foremost, to get this out of the way real quick, the deep video, I'm glad you guys like it so much. It's doing quite well so far. About sponsors, they help out tremendously. Patrons are very, very hard to come by. And to do this work, it's like, since I upgraded to the silicone, my expenses have just shot way up. And I just want to be able to make sure that I produce quality now and potentially even sell some if there are people out there that want something. So one of the problems I had before was the air dry clay things I was making. Some of my most popular sculpture videos were air dry clay characters. And someone would say, I want to buy that, and then I couldn't put it in a box and send it. I think I did the Slender Man giveaway, and the winner was pleased until it got to his house in several fractured pieces. And it's just a very frustrating problem. So I still have several of the air dry clay sculptures here that I don't know what to do with because I can't ship them, and I'm in Northern Ireland, so it makes it even more difficult. Even if I was just in the mainland UK, it would be a little easier. But so anyway, I switched over to the silicone, and these sponsors really help cover the expenses of that because it's much, much more costly. And I do like the improvement in quality. I hope you guys too do as well. About him, I want to get rid of him. I think I mentioned that he was a failed cast, and I really would just like to get the materials cost back because I spent a few hundred on materials to make him, and it was 3 weeks of just intensive, you guys have seen him, but just all that detail work that I had to put in. And I still have the mold, and I could make more that would come out probably better, but I really just kind of want to move forward. And if anybody's out there is interested in owning him, mega discount, just send me a message at my LoreCraft email, make an offer. As long as you pay shipping, I'll probably take it. All right, so I'm going to get to the questions. See what we got. All right, some of these were close to being the same, similar, and I'm going to kind of group them together. I think I wrote a little note here which ones were which. So I'll start out with questions 1, 7, and 17. I numbered these here because they're very similar. So 1 says, hi, since when do you practice sculpture? This is Miss Aki Art. I really like your amazing artwork. Well, thank you, Miss Aki Art. Number 7, Jaden Bailey says, what age did you officially start sculpting? And what made you decide to start doing it? So I'll get back to the second question. Zaldi Nivida. When did you start to sculpt? So those 3 ones are basically, when did I start to sculpt? How old was I? That's a difficult question to answer because it was kind of done in phases in my life. So when I was a kid, I had exposure to some of this stuff because, you get that crazy uncle. I think everybody has a crazy uncle. It's just written in stone, tablet somewhere in the universe. It says, you will have a crazy uncle or a weird uncle somewhere. And I've got a weird uncle, and he used to have stuff like this around, and he'd play with clay and make things, and he did animations and stuff. And so I got the exposure to it, and I got to play with clay a bit. And I always thought monsters and creatures and things were cool, and so I started playing around with it back then, but I never really made anything worthwhile. And the years would pass, and I think there was a phase when I was doing my undergraduate. I bought some clay, and I got water-based clay. Because I never liked the idea of my sculptures, I do this masterpiece, and then, if it was oil-based, then what do you do with it, And I think that's a problem for a lot of people out there, too, that they want to do something, make something extraordinary, and they want it to be permanent. And then if you want to do that, then there's just so much more. It's not like drawing where you get some pencils and paper. There's advanced drawing, and you get better pencils and better paper. But it's not too expensive. But if you do this oil-based clay sculpting, you end up having to get the oil-based clay, and then you have to get casting and molding materials, and it just becomes increasingly expensive, and you need space and a place to do it. It becomes kind of a barrier. But I remember in my undergrad, I was doing anthropology, And I was like, I want to make a Klingon or something, and
Impossible.
so I was trying making heads and things, and I never got very far because, you're having a few drinks with the friends on the weekend, you cover up your sculpture with the plastic bag, and then you forget about it for 2 weeks, you come back, and then it was all moldy and stinky. I was like, shh, just had to bin it. Also, I think when I was living in the woods, I made like this big dragon-looking claw. My friend reminds me of how I did that when I was like 17 or 18. But it was oil-based clay again, and it was like, what was I going to do with it? It just sat there and eventually got destroyed, or I gave it to somebody, and who knows what happened to it. So it was kind of an off and on thing, mostly off. And after that, I didn't touch clay for like 10 years. And then when I really started doing this is what you see on the YouTube channel, about 2 years ago now. And yeah, that's really when I really tried to actually put an attempt into doing this for real. It was a convergence of time that I had available to me, some space. I had a kitchen, and I was like, what am I doing in this kitchen? Not really having any guests over. I didn't need the space on the table, and I thought, well, I'll get to some of the other reasons in the questions here. But yeah, it's just been since then. So I've only been taking it seriously for these last 2 years, and you can kind of see the development and the progress of the complexity of the pieces in the video. So the very first head sculpt I ever did was The Fiend, which is I think my second video. My first video is me like hitting a speed bag or something. So I did that. I don't know why I put that up. Just wanted to see how to use the YouTube interface, I think. But yeah. So next question from Lena. When you feel unmotivated, uninspired, what do you do to overcome that? Well, thank you, Lena. That's a damn good question. It's a good question, and it's a difficult question because it happens to everybody. It happens to me. It happens a lot. And you end up sitting around. I'll have days where nothing happens, and you gotta feel it. And it's especially difficult when you're working on something with your hands, and you've gotta be into what you're making. And one of the sculptures that I really didn't want to make was the Michael Myers sculpt, because I had a sponsorship then, and I needed to make something, and it had to be something that people were going to watch. And at the time, there was really nothing really popular that was going to generate the kind of views they wanted. And so I kind of caved in, and I was like, I'll make this, and I really didn't want to. And it just made it so much worse. So, you've got to feel it. You've got to be into it. And if you ain't into it, nothing happens. So, I hate to sound really typical, but one thing that helps is coffee. Get an espresso machine, or go to Starbucks, because you'll get that huge stimulation boost from the caffeine, and it also is it gives you a good dopamine hit, and you tend to look at the world a little bit more in a positive light. Aside from that, it's good music will get you moving as well. But in terms of an internal issue, you gotta envision what it is you want to see. If it's about getting motivated to sculpt, or really anything really, you have to get a vision in your mind of what it is you want to see happen, and then see a good reason to do it. It's like, you go, I want to do this. Well, why do you want to do this? Ask the why question. I think Simon Sinek does a good TED talk on that if you ever want to watch that. I can put a link in the description. But know why you want to do it, and then pursue it. And you'll find that drive. If it's a good reason and it's really inspiring, you'll get there. But yeah, it's tough sometimes because it's like as you get older, you need better reasons, more inspiring, more almost in a spiritual sense. You need something that's going to help drive you to a conclusion. But one thing is like family. Is if you've got a family, you're going to be inspired to go to work. Even if you hate your job, you just go, I got to get up because I got to feed the kids. I got to pay the bills. So find a need, find a drive, something that's going to give you that force to get behind you. Get a vision of what it is you want to see, and then chase it down and do it. Where do you get your eyes for your sculptures? Good question. So sometimes I make them. A lot of the times I make them. Like I made Godzilla's eyes. His I got off of a gosh, I don't even know the name of it. It was an Etsy store, and that's an interesting story because there was during World War II, the Soviet advance was they were closing in on Germany, and the German people in East Germany they're freaking out. They're like, we gotta hide our valuables, and there was a glass making factory, a number of towns that were famous for their glasswares, and they were doing doll eyes and things. So they buried all of their most personal treasured belongings and valuables in these chests underneath these factories. And after the wall came down, people started going into these old factories and digging this stuff up. And so his eyes actually came out of some box. Those are almost 100 years old, or at least. And they put them up on Etsy, and I grabbed them. So yeah, they're really nice. So that's one example. Her eyes, there's this awesome company. These guys are fantastic. It's called Fourth Seal Studios, and they will do custom work. They're very busy. They get lots of orders. But I contacted them about doing some eyes for her, and they're experts. They do things top quality. So I can make eyes myself the way that I do them. But if I want something really specific, because they use ZBrush, I think, and they 3D print, so it's perfectly symmetrical. And then they make molds, and they have and there's another where they have a pressure pot. So when they put the clear coat on, they use an acrylic base, and it gets the bubbles out and stuff. So their way is very professional, and they come out looking damn near perfect. So I like to call them up. But otherwise, I do them myself. Like I made Dobby's eyes, Pennywise's eyes, One's eyes. I do a decent job. But if I want it absolutely perfect, I call those guys up. And now the other one is, what's their name? Another Etsy shop, I forget, but she's a Russian lady. And if I want like these, they're called semi-hemispherical glass eyes. And I sometimes call her up if it's for like a little creature character, like the demiguise. I use those, and Groot as well. What made you come into sculpting? Are there other artistic forms you can do? Yeah, and that's also a question. That's from Madison Johnson. And number 17 asked the same. Zaldi Mi Vida again asked, apart from sculpting, do you draw or make other art-related stuff? That is a good question. Again, I will say, I'll answer the first one. What made you come into sculpting? Well, that's a long one. I'll do it as short as I can without getting too personal. But I had a really bad year, a really tough time when it's right when I started the channel. I had just finished a amateur bodybuilding contest thing, and I was just really pushing myself really hard, and some bad things were going on in my life, and I was very tired, and it was depleted. And I think when you kind of really crash, you're kind of laying on the floor looking at the ceiling going, why? You get dark energy, and you've gotta do something with it, because it'll destroy you. And it is a form of energy, and energy can be used and focused. And in an interesting sense, I kind of went back to a almost childhood sort of situation where you look for something that you can find comfort in. And I had a sack of clay that I had bought. It was that new clay air dry stuff. And I thought, I've got to get off the floor. I've got to do something. And what do I want to do? Well, I'm going to do this. I had an image in my mind. I'm like, I'm going to make something. And I had seen on YouTube that there had been people that had filmed their sculpting and painting and drawing and did time lapses of it. So I thought I'll make something and I'll film it. And there's also some sense of being repeatedly told. Someone says that you're crap, you're garbage, you're trash, if this has ever been a problem in your life. And a lot of people have to deal with this all the time. There's always someone, past, present, or even in the future, they're going to tell you that you're a worthless piece of crap. And the best way sometimes to dispel that is to prove to yourself, and maybe them, usually you can't because people's minds are pretty fixed on these things, that you're not shit, And the creative process is a really great way to do that, I think. So you get that energy out, you make something real that wasn't there before, You learn something, you bring something of value to other people. I mean, but I'm getting far afield from the original question. But yeah, I mean, I started doing it because it was just a dark time, and so I think I'm glad I did it because I really found what I should be doing. Are there other artistic forms that you can do? No, not really. No, believe it or not, I can kind of draw, but I'm not very good at it. I never painted before I started painting these, and I don't know why I can paint these if I can't paint on paper. But when it comes to like working on two-dimensional stuff, I'm just not that good. And I actually had a problem because I had more experience with drawing, not very well, mind you, when I first started sculpting. And you can kind of see it in my earlier pieces because I would work the clay like I was on paper and it was very flat. And so I'd turn the sculpture to the side and the face was flat because I was doing it like I was drawing. So I realized I had to kind of start turning. And that's when I got these cake trays to turn the sculptures around more easily because you've got to look at it from every angle to make sure you're getting it right. So that answers that question. And these are several questions. What was the first sculpture you ever made? Well, that's again like you could count something I made look terrible when I was a kid. So I couldn't even recall what that might be. But if it's my advanced attempts, then it would be The Fiend. It says, what kind of sculptures do you like to make the most? I like fantasy. There's something calming and magical about it, like Creature and Dobby and Deet. Sometimes I like making ferocious things and scary things. It can be fun. It's a different energy, but fantasy I like the most. I like the Froud sort of thing, Brian and Wendy Froud's kind of concepts, and the Harry Potter looking type things. There's a cuteness to it. But scary things as well. They can just be. There's an intensity there. It's high energy, and it's like whoa, But that can burn you out. So if I had to pick one, I'd definitely say fantasy stuff for sure. Have you ever sculpted characters straight from your imagination? If so, for what purpose? I have, and I guess The Fiend would qualify. That Nushi thing I did, the little blue dragon, as well. But and some of my stuff I made when I was a kid. But I'd like to do that more. And I have a lot of ideas, but it's just not conducive with the way YouTube works. If I started making things that nobody wanted to see, or there's completely, I will eventually in the future make more things that are totally original, and I want to. But the YouTube algorithm and the way it works, if I started doing things that I created a name and made the thing, and said, hey, look at, even if it was great looking. And I think, characters like Creature, an example, if it's not trending and people aren't searching for it, you'll get no views unless they're from your most dedicated subscribers. And again, the way YouTube has changed things, you have to click that notification bell. If you're dedicated, you do that and then you show up. But there's only a small fraction of people that subscribe that actually are ready to show up and see your next piece. And I could spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks on something original and get less than 10,000 views because just people aren't all that interested, and that's not sustainable, sadly. Hopefully someday I'll be able to do that more, or I can kind of squeeze in an original piece between some of the more popular stuff. But it is definitely something I want to do more, and hopefully if things stabilize, I will. Do you like video games? Would you ever sculpt a famous video game character? Of course I like games. Old school games. I started out on Contra and the original Legend of Zelda, and I've been thinking about doing like Mario, but like a old man Mario, kind of like Old Man Logan, kind of hyper real but bruised and beaten up. But I've had a lot of ideas about that. I did Raziel, that's one of my videos, so I've done that. And people keep asking me to do Kane, and I haven't yet because of the same reasons. It'd be very expensive, and I just need that kind of support. I actually have a crowdfunding money pool section on my website if you guys want to throw some cash in a pot, because to make one of these characters that a lot of people might want to see but not enough to pay through the AdSense, you gotta back it up or it just can't be done. It's unfortunate, but sometimes it's $500 at least in supplies alone, and then several weeks of work, and that like one turned out this way. I spent over $500 on him to make him, and I think I got $15 back in AdSense from YouTube. So if it's something people really want to see and it's a small enough group, if they're vigorous and enthusiastic enough, just throw some cash in the pot and I'll do it. I want to. But aside from that, it's really difficult. So, can you make a Jason Vorhees sculpt? Make him maskless. This is from Mr. Funny. Okay, well, I could. It would be very difficult. It would take a lot of time, and I'm not sure how many people would show up for that. But I do like to try to make things that are entirely original, or when I say entirely original, I mean like nobody's done it yet. So I know I'm the first person to make a deet. I know I'm the first person to do a creature, and one, and I know I'm the first person to do a really big Godzilla sculpt and put them up on YouTube. So I try to do things like that, and if it's really popular and other people have done it, I at least want to be able to add something new or of quality or value to the space. And if not, I just typically avoid it. Now, Jason's cool. I like Jason. I'm a big fan of the 80s horror slasher films and stuff. But there's a guy, Scareware Productions on Instagram, I think it is, and he has done a couple versions of the unmasked Jason, and they're superb. And I saw his stuff and I thought it would take a lot of effort and time for me to match what this guy's already done, and I just didn't feel inspired enough to do it. Maybe someday, but until that happens, I suggest you check him out. Bleeding Orchids says, how long have you been sculpting? Because your sculptures look so real and amazing. Thank you very much, Bleeding Orchids. It's really just been the 2 years, really, that I've been taking it seriously, as I said. So yeah, just trying to up my game and evolve and use better materials and techniques as I keep moving forward. Abi Ram says, yours is the best sculpting I've ever in YouTube. Can you teach me? Support from India. Try sculpting Thanos with a gauntlet. Well, teaching, it's like I haven't really felt confident enough to do that. I might do more of kind of a tutorial course thing for the patrons on Patreon in the near future. Start filming stuff like that, narrating the process, slow things down. I may do that. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I will. It's just, it takes a lot of time to get something like that set up. And about the Thanos thing, I did Thanos. I wasn't really entirely happy with the result of that particular sculpt. I had done it, I had planned to do it, and this other guy did it first, and I made a kind of a joke about it and roasted him in the intro. And I think that was the first time I got a lot of hate, because I think the guy had fans, and it's not his fault, you know. He's a cool guy. I actually exchanged emails with him, the Stephen Richter fellow, because he did a Thanos that got many millions of views, and then he did it before I did it. And he's got, you know, armor, and he did the gauntlet and all that stuff. And he does great work. But yeah, I think he had some fans that saw that I put that video up, and I was just kind of roasting him, like, because I was like, damn it, he did it first, you know. And but some of those people made some comments that were just absolutely vicious. And then I wasn't entirely pleased with the sculpt itself. And speaking of the gauntlet, I don't have a 3D printer. I don't know how to use ZBrush. This is all done by hand. And there are sculptors out there that can both sculpt and ZBrush and 3D print. And if you're looking to do geometric things, like robots and armor and stuff, the 3D printing is really the way to go. It's the best way forward. And I just don't have access to that tech or that money to buy it. So making a gauntlet out of clay, it would take a long time, and it probably wouldn't come out nearly as good as if I had done it on ZBrush and printed it. So again, I typically avoid hard geometric things for that reason. But we'll see to the future. We'll see what happens. I heart movie music. What is your biggest dream sculpt? Like, what is the one thing that you want to sculpt the most that maybe you haven't done yet? Gosh, that's tough. There are things that are life-size that I'd like to do. I'd like to be able to do more hyper-real, specific people. I wanted to do, and I still wanted to do David from The Lost Boys, because it's such a really intimidating and memorable image. I've been wanting to do Saruman the White, and make it look just like Christopher Lee, like to where you just couldn't tell that it wasn't Christopher Lee doing, you know. I'd like to do more stuff like that, but it's very intimidating. And the one time I did do or attempted to do a portrait. It came out okay. I'm not happy with it. I mean, you can kind of tell who it's supposed to be, and I'm like, could have been better. But it was my first try, and I'd like to try again. But if you're doing that in silicone, man, you've got to be a master. And there are masters, and I've seen them, and they make me look so small. They make me feel small. But that's where I'd like to be at someday. But aside from that, man, I'd like to see monuments again, like monuments that were just extraordinary, like, from the classical period, like the Colossus of Rhodes or something. You see stuff like that in Lord of the Rings when they're going down the river in those canoes, and you see these massive, sculptures of these old kings. Like, we could do stuff like that. I don't know why we don't. I mean, the kind of crap that these fine art galleries, these fine artists, they make this stuff it's like melted plastic doll heads, and somebody will pay 10 grand for it or something. It's obscene. And I just don't understand what's wrong with them. Millions and millions of dollars I've seen spent on some of these auctions on what I would consider to be complete worthless trash. It was so much money spent that they could have built like an entire temple to, Zeus out of marble, like the ancient Greek times, and it would have been something that everybody could go to look at and enjoy and just be awed by. And they just don't do that. I don't know why, but the art crowd is a funny group, and there's definitely enough money in the elites that buy and patron the fine art stuff, and then, or I should say not fine art, I should say postmodern art, because that's really, like, fine art can still be the kind of classical sculpture that I like, and that's good. It's the postmodern stuff, like I seen an upturned bed in a dirty apartment. Just, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But yeah, it's stuff like that. I don't get it. It bothers me a bit much, even, because it's hard for me to get by with what I'm doing sometimes, and I'm like, where's all the money? And it's like, well, that rich guy over there decided he wanted to buy this piece of shit. And I'm like, why the hell don't they like this stuff? But yeah, I'd like it if those wealthy folks would hire old classical style marble sculptors and build some great monument that you would just see, like if you were transported back in time and be like, holy shit, like, this is amazing. It's amazing what they used to do, and then they just could now and just don't. So that's what I'd like to see and potentially be involved in. Alex Kaiser says, what are the best resources to learn casting into silicone or other like mediums? I know it gets costly, but I have not been able to find an informative educational video. My style of work is very familiar to your air dry days. Due to the fact your work is 100% inspired me to learn this amazing hobby. Cheers, man. All right, thank you, Alex Kaiser. Well, there's a site that I used to frequent on YouTube, a channel called Brick in the Yard Mold Supply, and they actually have some pretty good tutorials on how to make molds properly. So that's probably the shortest answer I'll be able to give in one of these questions, but thank you for asking. I'll put the link in the description. Question from Aliyah Zara. Where did you learn to make sculpture, and what is the most difficult thing you've ever experienced in making a sculpture? All right, the first question, where to learn? Self-taught. No, I never took any classes. I never, everyone has art school when they're kids, but they didn't teach me how to do any of this. In fact, I've had students from the Ulster School drop in, College of Art up here, asking me, how to do stuff, and it's weird because none of their teachers seem to know how to do any of this. So it's more of an explorative. You look at what the experts are doing, like Stan Winston, Alec Gillis, Rob Bottin, Rick Baker. These guys are legends when it comes to this kind of work, and they just figure it out. A lot of these guys, Barry Gower, BGFX, they start out in their garage or their bedroom, and they just kind of looking at things and figuring how to make certain things, and they'll see what other people have done, they see what it's made out of, and they just get to work, and until they play with it and they come up with their own ideas. And I pretty much did the same thing. I was like, wow, that looks great. What is it? How did they do it? And I saw the silicone that people were using, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. I never thought I'd be able to afford it. but when things started picking up for the channel, it was a risk. You know, it's like, am I going to spend hundreds on this stuff and not know if I'm doing it right? And I wasn't comfortable with destroying the sculptures. You know, that was a big fear I had to overcome. And yeah, that actually leads into the second question. What was the most difficult thing you ever experienced when making a sculpture? It's like tearing it apart. I never wanted to do that, and that's evidenced in the air dry clay. That was the first manifestation of it. I wanted to be able to make something once and say, wow, that's amazing, and paint it and have it, you know. But obviously I had to stop doing that because I wanted to make duplicates and increase the quality. So, like, you know, I can hair punch now, which looks better, you know, than gluing it on with some of the old ones. So yeah, most difficult thing ever experienced when making one is having to tear it down. Other things though, like, you know, or if I had a Freddy I was doing that had fell off the table, possibly due to supernatural causes, I don't know. But that one's I plead the fifth on that one. But it's crashed and face was smashed, and I was like, well, that sucked. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers that one. I mean, whew. Enid Marie asks, when making a certain character, how many copies do you make? Only one, if several. Why? And is there going to be a time where you sculpt a character from Avatar: The Last Airbender? Okay, first question. How many copies? Typically one. I just make the one copy, but I keep the mold in case someone else might want to buy another. You know, I could do private commissions, you guys. If you want something specific, you can check with me, and I might or probably could possibly do it. Just ask. If it's one of those original air dry clay ones, I really need to get rid of those. So you can check with me on that too. But it's, as I said, it's very hard to ship them because they tend to break. So it's something you'd have to pick up in person or be close enough to where I can personally deliver it. But yeah, typically only make one, unless someone wants another. And is there best Avatar: Last Airbender? I didn't plan on it. I mean, I'll make just about anything as long as it jives with me and the funds are there to support it. So I'll do commissions. Yeah, I'll make something specific that somebody wants and is willing to cover the expenses for. So if someone really wanted something from the Avatar: Last Airbender, for example, I would attempt to do that. But it's got to be backed by the appropriate funding. Because again, if I did a video on that and spent all that personal money to make it and put it up on YouTube, I'm positive that it wouldn't get the views to cover the costs. And it's unfortunate because there's so many things I want to make that are like that. I mean, there's characters from 80s films and yeah, just endless list. And I just know, like, again, if things really pick up and I get well off, I'll be making all sorts of cool stuff, and it won't matter if the views don't generate the revenues, because I'll just be like, I want to make that. I made it because I wanted to, and it's still people will enjoy it, and I'm glad that, you know, even if it's a few thousand people that thumbs up and like it, that makes me happy. It's just a problem about being realistic with funds. Ryan Thompson, mask maker. What's your editing app that you use? Oh, that's easy. Adobe Premiere. Yep, Adobe Premiere. I have the Adobe Creative Suite, and sometimes I use After Effects. I get a template or Photoshop to help adjust some things, like the logo that I put up in the corner and things like that. But yeah, it is primarily Adobe Premiere. It's the one, Adobe Premiere Pro. Wolf Russell 1. Other than clay, what medium is your favorite to use, and what other medium do you have the most experience in? Well, I guess this is similar to some of the other questions, but I don't do anything except sculpt. I do have the other areas I have the most experience in is drawing, and I used to do charcoal and graphite stuff. But again, I wasn't very good at it. Some people will disagree. So, oh, that's really nice, that's great, but trust me, like, it's not the same. I see what's wrong with them, and it's not like the clay. I think that the difference between, you know, the sculpting and the drawing is that with the clay, I can keep adding and subtracting, and you know, it's like a process of searching for what you're looking for. Whereas if it's on paper, you can only erase so many times before you destroy the paper, and that's probably why I never advanced enough in drawing to where I would actually say it was any good, because it was like, no, that's not right, you keep erasing, and then and then you can't even erase what you put on because it's kind of too deep into the paper now, and then you keep, and then the paper, yeah, it's a mess. So I just couldn't get past that, and that's a shame because a lot of people I think don't try three-dimensional artwork like this because they can't draw, and they're like, well, I can't even draw. Why would I try that? But surprisingly, you might be able to do this better than you can do something 2D. So I would tell anybody to give it a chance if you can afford it and have the time and the space, because it does make a mess. So Zaldi Mi Vida, she asked 3 questions. I'm going to get to the other ones. What's my favorite sculpture? That was question number 2 from Zaldi Mi Vida. What's my favorite sculpture? Gosh, that's hard. That's a tough one because there's so many that I've got that they signify different things to me. I think the Night King was the first sculpture I made where I realized I was good at this. Like I went, or I should say good enough to keep doing it. It was the first time, there was a period of about an hour where I had been working the clay, and I was at a point when it looked like, oh, this is pretty cool looking. And then over that period of an hour, I was working it and refining it, and I took a look, and I went, holy shit, that looks like a person. Like it looked like a real person. And it's the first time that it ever happened to me, ever. And it shocked me, and I realized that was the time I went, there's a future with me doing this. Like I could do this more, and it's good. You know, I'll get better, and because you know, I'd never thought I could actually create something with the proper proportions. I mean, I did darkness before that, and the thing with him was that he was impressive because of his size. But there's all sorts of things wrong with him when I look at him now. I'm like, geez, his you know, if you look at his profile, it's too flat, and like I was talking about with, you know, the carryover from my drawing days, it was just too two-dimensional, and I was doing it wrong. There's no skin detail and all that, but you know, it's impressive in its size. But aside from that, the Night King was like, I looked at it from every angle, and I went, this looks like a guy, like a real person. So that's, yeah, and the other ones, like I love Creature. 1-1 really is great. Obviously, the Clown has a special place because it kind of put me on the map. It was my first big success in terms of views and notoriety. But you know, there isn't anyone in particular where I'm like, this is the best. I mean, I really like Deet, for example. I don't want to let her go. I'm going to take her everywhere. She's so cool. No, there's too many. They signify different things for me. So I wouldn't be able to just say there's just one. I think this is the last question. From Purple Plant. What's the average time it takes you to finish one of your projects? I'd say 2 weeks. 2 weeks, roughly. And it's a lot of work. You're constantly going after it. And, you know, there's days you got to take a day off. I'd always tell you, take breaks. Take breaks. Take pictures from different angles at different distances. This is one of the things I've had a problem with early on, and still do, is perspective. And you'll find if you've got a camera and you're up close taking pictures, it looks totally different if you back up and zoom in and take pictures. So I'd say get at least 3 feet away, zoom in a little, and take shots that way, because that's how most people are going to see it. And try to work from that. And look at it from all angles, and then take a break, because your brain starts to get foggy, and you'll see things that aren't actually necessarily the way it is, and you'll start kind of working in a direction that is totally counterproductive. And you've got to take some time to let your brain clear up and process, maybe on a subconscious level, what you've been doing and how it's supposed to look. And you'll come back in an hour or the next day, and you'll be like, oh, I didn't see that, or I didn't see that. Oh, I got to fix this, you know? So definitely take breaks. And that's one of the reasons why it might take a little longer. Because, you know, if it was just a matter of sculpting and you sat there for 8 hours, you get a lot done, but it just doesn't quite work out that way. You have to stop occasionally, and even stop for a couple days sometimes, get refocused and get re-inspired again to get back on it. So in total time, like if it was actually the total working time, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but usually around 2 weeks. Lately it's been longer because other things get in the way. Yeah, so I think that's it. Gosh, this was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my tea. If you've got any other questions, you can put them in the comments. And yeah, let's do this again sometime. Okay then, so I will start working tonight on the next character, and hopefully you guys will be pleased with that as well. Now I gotta go edit this footage out and make a whole bunch of jump cuts. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for the questions, and I will see you soon. Cheers. And thanks to the patrons who help keep LoreCraft moving forward.